Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Listen, I told you on Thursday, remember we did a bonus episode Thursday Aaron Torres pod, and it was based on the news that Colorado was essentially, at that point, unofficially leaving for the Big 12. As I told you, the reports were that the two sides had discussions. I said, bottom line, a Pete Thamel, a Ross Dellinger, they don't report on discussions unless something is already done. And so because of it, I said this is going to happen before we record Friday's episode. It does happen on Thursday afternoon. As you listen, Colorado is a member of the Big 12 for the 2024 football season and beyond. What I want to do now, though, and where I think this will get interesting and where we can make this an interesting conversation, is to discuss what is next. And we did a lot of it really on Thursday's Aaron Torres pod. But what I want to do is essentially do a notebook style segment here on the Aaron Torres pod. And what I mean by that is, you know, the old newspaper notebook columns where a reporter, a writer would share everything that they're hearing kind of in bullet point segments. Well, over the last probably 4 or 5 months, I've had a ton of calls with people, sources, whatever you want to call them, about the future of college sports and specifically this Big 12, Pac-12 stuff. And so what I want to do is share everything I know as of this moment about the present and future of both the Big 12 and Pac-12 and what could happen next. Before we get to individual schools, I think the most important thing that we need to discuss is that pretty much all of this, the future of both the Big 12 and the Pac-12, comes down to what number does the Big 12 decide to go to when everything is settled. As of right now, when Texas and Oklahoma leave next season, the Big 12 will actually have 13 schools. Colorado joins next season, and of course, Central Florida, BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston join this season. Texas and Oklahoma are there. And so the question becomes, once Texas and Oklahoma leave, the Big 12 is not going to stay at 13. So does it go to 14 or does it go to 16 and match the same number of schools that the SEC and the Big 10 will have at that point? Because the bottom line, if you take nothing else out of this, if the Big 12 decides to go to 16, almost certainly most, if not all of those schools will come from the Pac-12. And because of it, that is kind of the key to the future of the Pac-12. If the Big 12 decides to stay at 14, I think the Pac-12 probably survives. If the Big 12 decides to go to 16 and takes 3 to 4 Pac-12 schools, including Colorado, then that conference is in big trouble. So let me tell you what I know here as of about 7:30 Eastern time on Thursday. In terms of number 14 for the Big 12, the first school that I continue to want to talk about, not what I want to talk about, what I believe is the most important school to talk about here is UConn. And I know there's a lot of conflicting reports on UConn right now. I have been very steadfast. I believe they are in line to get a potential bid to the Big 12. But I've also seen multiple reports from other outlets that maybe, they have fallen to the back of the line. I saw a Brett McMurphy report, which, by the way, had some holes in it we'll get to in a minute, that says the focus is solely on Pac-12 schools. Then they will circle back to UConn. What I can tell you, as of late Wednesday into Thursday, UConn still felt and feels very good that they will eventually get a bid to the Big 12. Stuff is fluid. Stuff can change. But I am here to tell you, let me just say, I know for a fact that UConn, as of Thursday morning, after the Colorado news, felt very good that they will end up in the Big 12. Now, what this could come down to, and we've talked about it, It could come down to the wants and desires of the commissioner, Brett Yourmark, versus the wants and desires of the 12 schools that are currently in the Big 12, 13 if you include Colorado, but I don't think we include Colorado in this conversation. I've said it many times. Other people have said it. I'm not the only one. If it was solely up to Brett Yourmark, the commissioner of the Big 12, I believe that UConn would be school number 14. And it's for all the reasons we've discussed before. Brett Yourmark is a Northeast guy. Prior to coming to the Big 12, he worked at Rock Nation, which is an agency based out of New York. And I think he sees value in UConn from two places. One, it is a bridge to the New York City market. So now, listen, maybe instead of bringing Kansas to Storrs, Connecticut, maybe you play a neutral site game at Madison Square Garden and call it a Big East or a Big 12 game, excuse me. Maybe you have an out-of-conference tournament, the ACC, SEC challenge, Big 10, Big 12 challenge, whatever. Maybe now you have some sort of Big 12 challenge based out of New York City. Also, UConn, it goes without saying, aligns very much with what we've talked about with Brett Yourmark before. Brett Yourmark believes in the value of college basketball and that college basketball is very undervalued in the current media market. Also, as I've said many times, when the next wave beyond this of realignment comes, and if the SEC goes to 20 to 24 schools, same with the Big 10, when and if the ACC kind of falls apart, the Big 12 wants to make itself the best basketball conference possible to protect itself when the SEC and the Big 10 ultimately expand again. And again, it goes to what I said months ago about this topic, is that when the ACC breaks up, and by the way, I know I'm going in a lot of different directions, but stay with me here. When the ACC breaks up, some of those schools are going to go to the SEC, some are going to go to the Big 10. At that point, do those two power conferences try to break off and do their own thing? Well, if the Big 12 has the best conference in basketball, you can't do that. You have to include the Big 12. So the point I'm trying to make, we can get into this. If it's confusing, I apologize. But the Big 12 is trying to position itself as the best conference in basketball. UConn provides that. The question now is, do you get sign-off from the presidents? Because as I've said many times, as much clout as the commissioner has, while he or she is the public-facing representative of the conference, decisions ultimately come down to the votes of the school presidents. And there are mixed reports if the school presidents really want UConn. What I can say about that, couple things. One, I know that multiple school presidents from the Big 12 have been to UConn's campus. They like what they've heard. They like this. They like that. And most of their questions clearly center around football. Listen, I know I'm a little biased. For people who don't know, I'm not going to try to not be transparent about this. I am a UConn alum. I can tell you, if UConn is in a conference with Jim Mora, they will be okay. I tweeted this out on Thursday afternoon. For all the talk about how committed is UConn to football, you understand that Jim Mora, their football coach, has a better resume than basically any coach currently in the Big 12, right? Like, you understand that. Jim Mora, in 6 seasons as a Power 5 head coach, 2 10-win seasons, 4 8-win seasons. That's more than, by the way, Texas and Oklahoma, their 2 head coaches, a combined 0 10-win seasons. UConn's head coach has 2 of them. Sonny Dykes at TCU has 1 10-win season. It was last year. Chris Kleiman, 1 10-win season. It was last year for Kansas State. Dave Aranda, 1 10-win season. It was 2 years ago at Baylor. So this idea that UConn is so far behind, their coach is as accomplished as anybody, but will the president sign off? That's the big question. And there is one other note that came out on late Thursday that I think is worth mentioning here. Andrew Marchand, who covers the media space for all sports, he put out a very interesting tweet on Wednesday night that said that basically Brett Yourmark, that little devil, that genius that he is, negotiated a deal with the TV partners for the Big 12 where any school that gets added from a Power 5 conference automatically gets the same amount of money as all of the other schools in the league. So all the schools, if you add Power 5 schools, you don't have to give up money. If you're Oklahoma State, TCU, Houston, UCF, Cincinnati, whoever that has been negotiated into the deal, Colorado from day one will get a full TV situation, who get a full TV share from the Big 12 without any other school having to sacrifice. So that's important. And that's why I believe that, UConn could be behind, because they're not a Power 5 school. Now, I have also been told UConn could enter and not get a full share to start, that it could be a 2, 3, 5-year process where they build up to a full share, where they kind of, if you will, prove their commitment to football. Listen, I'm out on an island. I'm not backing off. I want to get off UConn and get to everybody else. I believe as of right now, UConn is still in position to head to the Big 12. And I think we'll probably get some information one way or the other here in the coming days. From the non-UConn perspective, the team to me that is most likely to end up in the Big 12, and it's a Pac-12 school, that is the Arizona Wildcats. And what I would say is, listen, if it comes down to the Big 12 doesn't want to go past 14, they're at 13 now, would the Big 12 choose Arizona over UConn? Is it a one or the other? I don't know. That I can't answer. I can't answer who the Big 12 is prioritizing, but I feel confident saying that of every school currently in the Pac-12, the 9 that remain, now that Colorado, USC, and UCLA are gone, I believe that Arizona is the most likely to jump. And it's for all the reasons I just mentioned with UConn. But the thing about Arizona that really kind of jumps out to me, it feels like there is a natural, like it feels like Arizona is the one school their fans are ready to jump. And I don't want to speak for every Arizona fan. I know we got a lot of Arizona fans that watch my show and listen to my show, but I think Arizona fans, more than any other fan base, they're ready to make this move. And it's for a few reasons. One, it's about obvious stability, right? Big 12 right now is much more stable than the Pac-12. That's the bottom line. That's the truth. End of story, whatever. Two, there is the basketball element of things as well. By the way, there's the financial stuff that goes without saying. It's more money as of right now. But it's the basketball element of it. And we just mentioned how Brett Yourmark, the commissioner, wants to build the best Big 12 basketball power that it can be. You already have Kansas. You already have Houston. You already have Baylor. Maybe you had UConn. Maybe you don't. But Arizona makes sense because it very much strengthens the basketball product. I'll say this too. Arizona football is very good, is on the rise as well under Jed Fish. But from the basketball perspective, it makes sense for the Big 12, and I think it makes sense for Arizona too. You think about how bad Pac-12 basketball will be after USC and UCLA leave, it'll be awful. There were 3 Pac-12 teams that made the NCAA tournament this year: Arizona, UCLA, and USC. 2 of them are leaving. And so Arizona, do they want to stay in a conference where they could potentially fall behind, where they potentially are playing in a 1 to 2 bid league every year? That's where the Pac-12 is right now. Now, eventually the Pac-12 could add San Diego State, so that helps. But is that enough? I believe Arizona is ready to make a move. Will it happen? My understanding is right now, they don't have an offer, right? So it's no different than anything. You can like the prettiest girl or a pretty girl. I don't know if the Big 12 is the prettiest girl in this case. You can like a pretty girl, but until she says yes, you don't have a date. Until you get an invite to the party, you can't go. And so as of right now, as I record here, again, 7:30 Thursday night, the 27th, things can change, and they do. I don't know that Arizona has an invite, but I believe if they get an invite, they're jumping at it and taking full advantage. And I do think part of this comes down to what is that Pac-12 TV number? Because Colorado left, because the Pac-12 did not come up with a TV number, but Colorado had an offer from the Big 12. Arizona, as of right now, does not. That could change soon. One quick thing I want to clarify, and I saw, again, that goes back to the Brett McMurphy report about part of it was that the Big 12 is targeting the 4 corner schools: Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado. I don't believe that at all. And one misnomer that I have heard, I don't think Arizona and Arizona State are tied at the hip, okay? So if you're a Sun Devil fan, I don't know that, you might be out of luck, because I've heard differing things, and I've heard some people, oh, well, what about Arizona State? What about Arizona State? couple things. One, their administration is incompetent, and I don't think the administration is even pushing to get to the Big 12 right now. Their school president, Michael Crow, he doesn't care about sports. Hired Herm Edwards. The AD, Ray Anderson, Herm Edwards' former agent, he doesn't know what he's doing either. And so I've heard a lot of this. Well, what about Arizona State? We have learned time after time after time after time that state and local affiliations don't matter in this round of realignment. Now, 15 years ago, that was the case. 15 years ago, Oklahoma wouldn't make any move without Oklahoma State. Well, what happened when Oklahoma had the opportunity to go to the SEC? They jumped and left Oklahoma State in the dust. By the way, UCLA left the Pac-12 for the Big Ten, left Cal Berkeley, part of the same school system, in the dust. Oregon and Washington, if they got an invite to the Big Ten tomorrow, they would leave Oregon State and Washington State in the dust. And so I don't understand this narrative that like, well, what about Arizona State? Yeah, what about them? You haven't been relevant in a sport that matters in forever. That's on the administration. If they fall behind, they have no one to blame but themselves. Really, lastly, I want to spend some time talking about Oregon and Washington, because Oregon and Washington have been seemingly tied at the hip. And it's really interesting, right? So as I said to lead the segment, I would say over the past 4 to 5 months, really since basketball season ended, I have had dozens upon dozens of calls with people that I know about realignment. And the one question until recently that I could never get answered, I said, I hear so much about Arizona, Colorado, schools like that with the Big 12. Previously, it was the four corner schools. I don't think that's as much of a priority anymore. And I asked somebody, I said, why have I not heard anything about Oregon and Washington, which seem to be the two most valuable properties left in the Pac-12? And what I've been told is essentially this. Until maybe recently, which we'll talk about momentarily, I don't believe they've had much interest in going to the Big 12. They don't care. They don't want to do it. And I asked some people why, and they said, really, it's pretty simple. Oregon is kind of taking the charge here. And Oregon, as we know, all decisions that get made at Oregon go through the desk of Phil Knight. Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. Phil Knight, the most powerful person, in the state of Oregon, an Oregon alum, worth $42 billion. That's 42 billion with a B. And so Phil Knight really has no interest in pursuing anything other than the Big Ten. The Big Ten right now is not expanding beyond their 16. And so what I've been told, Phil Knight doesn't want the Big 12. He doesn't want Oklahoma State and TCU and Houston. No disrespect. It's just facts. He wants to wait, wants to get to the Big Ten and the prestige that comes with Ohio State and Michigan and whoever, Wisconsin, those kind of schools. And so that is why there's been no push from Oregon for the Big 10, for the Big 12, hoping they would essentially rather stay in the Pac-12, piece it together, and hope in 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it is, that the Big 10 comes calling again, hopefully sooner. I don't know. One thing I can definitively say, I don't know if that has changed with the Colorado news. And it sounds crazy, right? Like why would Colorado make a difference? Colorado's whatever. Well, Colorado does change some things, because if you're Oregon, you could sit there and say, we're not leaving for anything other than the Big 10. But with Colorado leaving, that now leaves the Pac-12 at 9 schools. If Arizona leaves after that, then you're potentially talking about 8 schools. And who knows, maybe if Oregon and Washington say no, the Big 12 does go after those corner schools, the Utahs and the Arizona States. I don't think they're a priority right now. But if Washington and Oregon say no, so the point is, did the Colorado move make Oregon force them to reconsider? As of right now, this second, I don't believe they have very much interest in the Big 12. But could they reconsider? I think you probably have to. You probably have to take that call. You have to ask questions, because you don't want to be the school that is left behind in the Pac-12 if all those corner schools leave. A couple other notes really quick. If you talk about a school that could end up getting screwed in all this, I think it's Utah. Utah, by the way, the 2-time reigning Pac-12 champs. And I've heard 2 differing things on Utah. One, I've heard they don't really have an interest in going to the Big 12, that BYU is in the Big 12, and that they don't want to be seen as chasing or following BYU. I've also been told on the flip side that the Big 12 is like, we don't need 2 schools in Utah. Like, respectfully, Utah. Got some great listeners in the state of Utah. That we don't want or need 2 schools in Utah. And so you talk about a school that could end up getting screwed out of a spot. There just might not be enough chairs at the table for Utah. Because again, let's say Arizona goes. Let's say, oh, by the way, maybe Oregon and Washington kind of, the light bulb goes off and says, we're going to get left behind there. Does Utah end up as the school that gets screwed? I don't know. Finally, again, to go back to some reports I've seen, well, could the Big 12, if they miss on the Pac-12 schools, could they have San Diego State? All I'll say about San Diego State, they're not going anywhere for 2 years. Remember, because of everything that happened the last month, San Diego State now has to wait 2 full years before they can get out of that Mountain West contract. They are not going anywhere. Whew, that was a lot on conference realignment. I apologize if I went in a lot of different directions. I'm just trying to get you as much information as I can. Because listen, this is what I'm here to do, right? I think I have some insight that maybe some other people don't. I'll be honest. I think my information from day one has been as good as anybody's in the college sports space. And so that is what I have as of Thursday night. And again, if stuff breaks over the weekend, we'll react to it either in real time, maybe do a show on Monday, but that remains to be seen.